Hello, and welcome to today's program on Rotary in Action. Today we have a very special group of men and women that have been all over the world helping get rid of polio. Our program today is about Polio Partners, a worldwide event that has taken 12 or 14 years to get to where it is today. When we come back, I'm going to share with you some very special guests that have changed the world. Please join me after this break. Welcome back. With us today we have three very special guests. Our first guest is Mr. Stephen Brown. Next to Stephen is Jack Campbell, great working hard guy for Rotary and our foundation. And last, to the far right, is Dr. Nick Tsoulos. And Nick, I'd like to start this with you. Tell us a little bit about the process of how this eradication of polio began and what has led us to this point.
Well, in 1979, the year that the disease smallpox was eradicated, the first disease ever in the world to be eradicated, the Rotary clubs in Manila started a polio eradication program in their country, which involved the cessation of hostilities between rebels and the state troops. They were so successful that Rotary clubs around the world began these polio immunization drives. They were successful in Honduras as well, and by 1985, we were so successful in the Western Hemisphere especially that Rotary International decided to make it their first Rotary International project to eradicate polio from the world, which would be an incredible feat because we could stop then immunizing any children for polio once we eradicated the disease. In 1988, 3 years after we established that goal, Rotary had raised over $220 million for this effort. Since then, we've been quite successful.
It's amazing. I know that the stories go on, but Jack, I know that you were involved in your own Rotary Club, but tell us how that began.
Well, it started really, I should go back to when I was 5 years old. I got polio in 1948 and was in an iron lung and never was really able to walk after that. But when I was 50 years later in 1998, I was thinking I ought to do something to sort of celebrate or mark the anniversary of having gotten polio. And I remembered that Rotary had done a fundraiser for polio immunizations about 10 years earlier that I'd heard about, but I didn't really know anything about Rotary. So I decided to look in the phone book and find a Rotary Club.
And that's how it all began.
And that's how it began.
And Steve, you've been involved for so many years in Rotary, but how did you feel when this all was beginning? Was it a mind-boggling operation, or did you have a clue where it would go?
Well, the polio eradication effort started out about the time that I joined Rotary, back in 1986, and Rotary was all new to me, and I had no idea of the magnitude of the organization and the challenge that had been presented to us. But it was, our club got behind it very much as an exciting international project.
It's amazing, but all of us come from different backgrounds, and yet here we are some 10 or 12 years later. It's interesting because all the men and women that we've come in contact with that have been all over the world have the same story. Nobody believed that it could be accomplished in such a short time frame, even though it has been relatively 10 or 12 years. But we're not finished with it yet, from what I gather. Nick, I wanted to ask you, how did your family get involved in this? Was there something that happened in your own family that sort of crystallized this in your own mind?
No, not really. It wasn't anything in my family. It was me having joined Rotary in the early 70s and me being given the responsibility of raising money in that 1986, 87, 88 fundraising drive to raise that money for our club. And what we did was to buy a new BMW and raffle it off. And it was quite a moving experience because the fellow who won the raffle, interestingly enough, wasn't a Rotarian, but he had polio. And he was a fellow who had a weak arm. He had come to the United States from the Netherlands and had quite successfully established a wonderful business. And he came to our Rotary Club and he said he didn't want the BMW. He wanted the profits of the whole raffle to go to PolioPlus. So we more than doubled the money that went to Rotary. It was pretty exciting and very emotionally moving event when he showed up at our Rotary Club and said he didn't want the BMW.
You know, there are thousands of stories, and I know we all have them to share this afternoon, but what I'd like to do now is to introduce a gentleman that's a very special tape of a doctor, Joe Serra, who lives up in Northern California, who has devoted 20 some odd years of his life to reaching out and helping one country, a little country in Africa called Malawi. He's an orthopedic surgeon, but more importantly, Joe has galvanized so many people in the United States to go and serve. So with that, let's take a look at this next tape.
I saw these three ladies walking down the road and I thought, what a neat picture, and I asked them if it was okay if I took their photo, and they said yes. And as I focused my camera, the mother in the middle pointed to her little baby daughter and said, she received her drops last week. And she was talking about the vaccine that we've all talked about, and those of you that were in Eritrea in December know what it's like to give those drops at National Immunization Days. And as we sit here today, there are probably parts of the world in those 25 to 30 countries where we're still working very hard at National Immunization Days that are receiving the vaccine. Many of you in this room will remember scenes like this. This was one ward in a hospital in Detroit, Michigan, where the beds were taken out and iron lungs were put in to take care of the polio victims of one epidemic. In July and August, that used to be the time when mothers and fathers wouldn't let their children go swimming because of the virus. We weren't sure what it was, but there was something in the water that would cause infantile paralysis.
That tape was shot parenthetically at the Salk Institute, as I recalled, for that meeting. Jack, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about how this happened in your own club, and what would you like to add as far as your own involvement on that fundraising side?
Well, when I first, as I said at the last second, as I challenged the club to make contributions to polio that I would match, I was not in Rotary. It came about later that they decided that, yes, they wanted to do that. And so we had a fairly large fundraising organization there. Nick was leading it on the club side, and I was just an outsider that was trying to encourage them to help get rid of polio for me, because I've got a personal agenda of getting rid of polio before it gets rid of me.
Amen. Amen.
And so after during the same period where they were doing the fundraiser, shortly they asked me why didn't I join Rotary. Well, I hadn't really thought I would, but Nick insisted. I said, I can't even get in the car by myself anymore, so I wouldn't be able to get to club meetings. And Nick says, well, I'll come to your house and help you in the car. And so he forced me, essentially, to become a Rotarian.
We've never regretted it. I want you to know that.
Thank you.
And Nick, what was your thrill out of being involved with Jack in your own club?
Well, I think the support of the whole club. Jack challenged us to raise a significant amount of money, and at first the club was kind of nervous about it because they wondered whether it would impact our regular fundraiser, and if people donated to the polio fundraiser, would they not donate to the regular fundraiser? And I said this was such a terrific opportunity, how could we pass it up? And we didn't. And within about a week and a half, we raised just about all of what Jack had challenged. So we went back to Jack and said, you know, we got most of it, why don't you up the ante? And he did. He increased the amount that he would challenge, and we raised it. And we raised a significant amount of money, and I think that kind of emboldened us to go to the district as a whole. I was district chairman for PolioPlus fundraising that year, and Bob Tomko, another past district governor in our club, and I went around the district and spoke at a number of clubs, and it kind of caught fire. People saw what we had done, and that year we raised $137,000 in the whole district, more than, I think, 4 times what the initial goal was. And we raised enough money to pay for a national immunization day in a country somewhere, and
That's
we
amazing.
wanted to do it.
That's amazing. You know, you think about how quickly that happened in less than 12 months, and yet we were just beginning at that time all over the world to really get a handle or get a grasp on it. I'd like to share with you, I think we have tape now on the actual eradication of polio over a couple of 3-year periods. If we can roll that tape now, I think it would be really fun to sort of share how far this has come.
Well, this is the map of the world in 1988, which includes in red the countries where polio was still endemic. You can see that most of North America was free in Australia. And there were 350,000 cases, over 350,000 cases in '88. By 1999, Rotary and the World Health Organization and the CDC had dropped that to 7,000 cases. It remains only in Africa, the Indian subcontinent. In India, this is a map of India, in 1998, there were over almost 2,000 cases of polio that year. By 1999, we had, by using massive national immunization days in which polio vaccine was administered to every child in the country, we had reduced it to almost a little over 1,000, and by last year to 150 cases. This is the current status. It still exists in the Indian subcontinent and parts of Africa, and we're making a major effort to wipe it out. This kind of shows you that initial fundraising drive raised a lot of money, which we invested. By the year 2005, we would have paid over $500 million to help eradicate polio.
It's absolutely astounding. I always am reminded of that goal that we had in our local district, that we raised that money. And Steve, tell us about how, after we'd raised these funds, how did we pick this little country that we decided to go to?
Well, you're referring to Eritrea, and that's, Nick mentioned that we raised enough money to help with the national immunization days for an entire country with $137,000. We picked Eritrea, which is a country many people are not familiar with, because there's a special relationship that's evolved between that country and the Rotarians in our district. It goes back starting in about 1990, some of us learned that there's a significant Eritrean community in San Diego. The Eritreans, some of them are banquet managers of the hotels where our Rotary clubs meet, and we learned about their country through them, and we learned that actually then they didn't have Rotary in their country. But then a couple of other things happened. In the mid-1990s, we did a program with the Eastern Africa, with that region of the world, and we found that a lot of the Rotarians in that part of the world had friends in Eritrea, although Rotary didn't exist there, and our African friends thought it would be good if we could have a Rotary Club in Eritrea. Come to find out, San Diego's Eritrean community is well organized, and we met with the leadership group from the San Diego Eritrean community, explained to them what Rotary is, and they thought that their country was ready for Rotary. So the local Eritrean community, together with the Rotarians in Africa, established a number of contacts there. We set up an organizational meeting back in 1996, and a core group of people formed and said yes, they wanted to be part of Rotary, they wanted to be part of this organization, and ultimately a club was chartered in Asmara, Eritrea in 1997. And because of our district relationship with the establishment of that club and the contacts that we have over there, it just seemed like a natural place. We had enough money to immunize the whole country, and so that's where we decided to go.
It's amazing. I know what, Nick, when we decided to go, as a doctor, you were helping give us shots so that many of us could go there and hopefully not get some terrible disease. Tell us a little bit about the process of how that occurred when we were there.
When we were in Eritrea? Well, it was pretty moving. Until then, I had only been raising money for paying for polio vaccine and hadn't been really involved. And I heard you give a talk saying that you were going to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. That's your line, Marty. And you said that you were going to go to the National Immunization Days in Eritrea, and I thought that I'd like to do that too, and so I took my frequent flyer miles, and I think we all did.
Yeah.
That went. Steve Brown went, Chuck DeVivier and his wife went, and Mel Gallegos went, and we went. And I think I didn't appreciate the meaning of us going, but when we got there and I saw how appreciative the Eritrean community was to our presence and what it meant to them that we were supportive of them. I think the most meaningful part to me, though, was participating in the child after child after child immunization with the polio drops. Was almost a life-changing experience.
I think all of us that have been, and we're just speaking as some Rotarians in our local area, but all these Rotarians that have gone around the world doing this, I think it has all changed our lives because of the passion of seeing hope because we've gone and done it. I'd like to have you see this tape now. This is another tape from Dr. Joe Serra. I'd like to have you roll this and we'll take a look at this and come right back.
This is what is going on throughout the world. National immunization days that are advertised nationwide. Many of you know of the efforts in India where in 1998, in one weekend, they immunized 125 million children in 3 days. They had over 200,000 volunteers, healthcare workers that were manning the vaccination post. And there's a saying that in India on that particular weekend, the question is asked, what else happened in India during that weekend? Nothing. Nothing happened. They had banners up, they had television spots, radio, everything, flyers, and they immunized that many children. Just incredible. And those are only the children under 5. So this is what we're seeing now, little kids like this that are coming in, and you can see the before and after picture. Here's a before. As soon as they get the drops and they realize that they're out of there pretty free, the things kind of brighten up. But they're just beautiful, beautiful children, and Rotarians now are volunteers, and this is what made the difference. This is why World Health Organization said, I think you can help. Because you've got the ability, the social mobilization in these countries. Not only will you buy the vaccine through UNICEF, but you have Rotarians on the ground in these countries that will help immunize, and that's what has made the difference. WHO and CDC don't have that kind of staff, but Rotary does. And Rotary continues to perform, and in most of the countries of the world, the volunteers that help man these NIDs are not only those that are coming from the United States, but those in the countries themselves.
We're back, and I know talking about Dr. Serra, what a special man he is. Jack, you had the privilege of working with him for quite a while. Tell us a little bit about his relationship and how you felt working with him.
Well, he's a very inspiring man. I worked with him last year. I was chairing a seminar on what Rotary does internationally. He was the guest speaker, and he came to talk to us about the polio progress in the world, because he is one of the leaders in the polio fight internationally on the polio chair leaders committee. And in fact, I made a good friendship with him, and I'll be seeing him again in a few months when we're both going to be at a progress report on how PolioPlus is being hopefully eradicated, an annual progress report on how many fewer cases we have this year, the next year, and where the problems still are.
One of the things that I was going to share with you, I don't know if you all feel the same way, but I remember all these things about Rotary, and yet I hear us always saying, I met a new friend, and they become friends for life. I think that's one of the joys of being involved in this kind of a field, but we all do this as volunteers. And Steve, I wanted to ask you, because this is, where are we going from here? I mean, that's the $64 question. What's it going to take to get this stuff off the planet?
Okay, well, Nick mentioned that we've made major progress. There's all countries except about 10 significant ones, polio has been eradicated. As was mentioned, we have some countries in Africa that need to be dealt with, and some countries in the India subcontinent. There's been $1.5 billion spent to date, 500 million of which has come through the Rotarians' contributions. But there's about $1 billion left that needs to be spent towards the eradication that remains to be done. And there are two efforts ongoing to raise the money for this. There's a public sector effort, and approximately $500 million has been committed or earmarked by the public sector of different countries for this eradication. I should mention that it's not just Rotary's involvement. We also have the Centers for Disease Control that do the surveillance. We have UNICEF that procures the vaccine, and we have a World Health Organization that really is involved with Rotary in the distribution of the vaccine. So it's the partnership of these four entities. And so we have about $500 million lined up through the public sector, and we've also started what's known as the private sector initiative. And there have been 20 metropolitan areas worldwide that have been identified where we're looking to raise money to cover this gap that's out there. We've had some significant participation from, most notably, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They've committed $50 million towards this effort. Ted Turner has established the United Nations Foundation, and he's earmarked $28 million of his UN foundation to go towards this effort. We also have the corporate sector that we're looking to. De Beers has committed $3 million to help with the polio eradication. And we're going to be meeting privately with some corporations around the world and with some philanthropists to see if we can raise the rest of these funds. We think it can be done. It can be done in fairly short order, and we're looking at just a few years period of time where we think that this disease will be eradicated, and it'll be, as Nick said, there's only been one time in the history of the world where we've had a disease eradicated, and we're looking forward to the eradication of polio in the very foreseeable future.
It's so exciting. I know that I felt that when we were in Eritrea, it was such a simple thing for us to take 10 days of our lives to be there. And I thought the most profound thing was looking into the eyes of these mothers and seeing them looking at us questioningly, like, why are you here? And later on they kept saying, well, you've given us hope. You've given us hope. And I think that's what this is all about, is giving people around the world this hope. It's really an astounding phenomenon. I can't thank you all enough for sharing this, Jack, especially you. I know this is a passion that you've scared his Rotary Club into oblivion in the last 4 years. But I think we're to the stage now where the light is almost at the end of the tunnel. And any upses that you wanted to bring up, any thoughts that you might want to bring to the audience's attention that you might want to share before we close?
Well, just that by wiping out polio, you do a couple things. You not only prevent a disease which kills children and paralyzes them, but you also all of a sudden save $1.5 billion a year, which is currently being spent to immunize children in the world. We'll be able to stop that, and we'll be able to use that money, which we use every year to immunize kids against polio, for some other good purpose. And I think the change in what that means to these countries is incredible.
It is incredible. When we look at the leadership around the world, especially with your conversations about countries that are continually contributing more funds, where we will be another 5 or 6 more years, I'm excited to be part of this process. You know what I'd like to do now is to roll into a tape that I think will sort of share with you all the whole balance of what Rotary is, and Rotary truly is in action. Let's roll this tape. Rotary International was founded in 1905. The goal of Rotary International is to seek peace through service to communities. Service above self has been the motto of Rotary International. Today, there are roughly 30,000 Rotary clubs in over 160 countries around the world. 1.2 million men and women are members in clubs that are all part of this unique international service organization. All clubs worldwide participate in various programs to fill the needs of communities. Each Rotary Club identifies its community needs and links up with other Rotary clubs to match funds that provide a school, a deep water well, a library, a hospital, or whatever is needed for that local community. Thousands of projects are completed each year thanks to the generosity of Rotarians and friends of Rotary. Whether in Africa, Asia, Europe, South America, or even North America, there are community needs that Rotarians help fulfill. Through this spirit of service above self, Rotarians build a fellowship that create friendships that last a lifetime. Men and women in Rotary provide the opportunity to reach out, help, and give hope to others. This service builds trust, and trust builds hope. Hope that through international service we can build a better world and create understanding and peace. This is the goal of Rotary International. This program is a window for you to see the projects supported by the Rotarians in your own community. Well, we're back, and it's a privilege to thank you, all three of you, for spending some time with us tonight. You know, this is a very special thing that we've done in sharing this passion. We hope that the audience knows that we want you to get involved as much as you can. But Steve, I want to thank you especially for taking the time out of your schedule, and Jack, and to Nick, and to your families for the privilege of having been your buddy and to work with you all. It's really an honor to have you here tonight, and we look forward to doing more in the next 5 more years so that we can actually say polio is off the planet. It's with that I thank you for watching this evening. We hope you come back for the next episode, because just like this one, they're full of passion. Thank you very much, and have a great day. This is Marty Peters saying thanks again for Rotary in Action.
Many places around the world are still fighting a war that most Americans don't know about, the war against polio. Since 1985, Rotary International's 1.2 million members have joined the battle against this paralyzing disease. Along with Rotary's partners, the World Health Organization, UNICEF, and the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, over 1 billion children have been immunized against polio. To find out more about Rotary's PolioPlus program, visit our website, Rotary, Winning the War Against Polio.